Yep, you're all set.
All right, perfect. Okay, we're going to go right into it because there's plenty going on when it comes to changes and updates going on in, excuse me, in the message center. So a couple things. The first thing, let's start us off with the admin center itself. And so we had this capability for a while, but they're giving us more capability to be able to add additional information to the email notifications we get from Office 365 council specifically. And this is around service health issues, right? So before we had the ability to do specifically incidents and advisories as they come out, and we can get them as Office 365 administrators in our inbox. Additionally, what they're doing is they're adding the ability to check the box for issues in your environment that require an action, right? So it could be, let's say one of them we've been talking about for a while is Internet 11, right? IE 11, that's going away. That would be something that you would get a notification on. Or issues with priority accounts that you have within your organization, right? So you have accounts that are considered VIP type accounts that you say a priority. This will get that information to that. So this is happening here late February to late March. So you may already have gotten it coming up here on mid-March already. So it's possible you already get this, but important, right? So notify your administrators, update your own internal operational documentation on these changes happening. All right. Again, at the high level, we're talking about Microsoft 365 apps and Office for web. This is kind of a nice little feature, especially if you have, myself, I may have access to multiple tenants, right? And Microsoft 365 tenants, whether it be my own personal one that I have, I may even have like a Hotmail or an Outlook.com or a Live connection, right? And I may have purchased Microsoft 365 for that. So you have this ability, you will have this ability to be able to switch between that without having to log out and log back in, right? So you go up to the profile picture, click on that, you'll see all these options as you maybe add them in to be able to make that switch back and forth between those accounts. This is happening here early April to late June. And the idea that, and keep this in mind, is you'd have to input that in, and then you would switch it in that browser that you happen to be in, or that open browser tab. Does that mean that you could maybe have multiple browsers? Yeah, you could do that, but this literally switches to that instance so that you can go back and maybe I need to do a quick email to a doctor, right? And I can do that from there as opposed to having to do it from my work account. So having that capability is kind of a nice deal. And again, coming up in April, going into June. Right, here's another one. Let's move it to Exchange a little bit. And this one's an interesting one because it kind of shows how sometimes Microsoft likes to play nice with competitors. Specifically, if you guys are familiar with this in Exchange Online or your Outlook Online, this every meeting online capability. So what that is if I were to schedule a meeting, right, I could go into my settings and check the box that says add online meetings to all of it, like by default, right? What this changes is you don't have to do it manual anymore. That would be automatically configured behind the scenes so that I don't have to worry about that. Now, here's the caveat to this is that if we're utilizing, say for instance, Zoom for Outlook. I know that's not what not everybody wants us to do, but sometimes you have some customers that might be the case. If you have that as an add-in into your Microsoft 365, so if I had to check that box, right, or if it's set to default, it will automatically set that up as a Zoom for Outlook meeting, right? So it doesn't necessarily, it won't go to Teams, right? It will go to whatever you have as that default plugin for your particular meetings, right? So these are all the supported three-party options that you see here, right? So in this section, you see all the options. This is a screenshot of what you can do now manually, right? So the administrators will be able to make that change using organizational configuration PowerShell to be able to automatically check that box for everybody. This is happening in April, early April, going into mid-June. All right, jumping to Yammer. We don't get many opportunities to be able to talk about Yammer, but there is a change, and this was based off of feedback from a lot of different companies, a lot of different users of Yammer. Late March going into early April, they're adding bookmarks into the new Yammer experience. And so basically you can go ahead and bookmark any conversation that you have. Then you can go into your profile and you can look at those bookmarks, or you can manage them, right? You can remove them if you need to after the fact. But it's a great way to be able to find that content and like, I got to remember to look at that later. Then you come back and look at that pretty easily with using this bookmark feature. Viva Topics, which not everybody is using it, but just so you know, there's some things that are now starting to work with other services. For instance, so this top news card capability, if you're familiar with SharePoint Online, when you're in, say, for instance, a communication site or a regular site, and you have creating an article specifically for that site, you have this ability to boost it, right? And that article, you can boost it for a certain amount of time period. Within that time period, then it's going to be available everywhere that it is, right? So now, I should say, early March, which is now, into mid-March, which is, we're getting to that point, you may see this ability in your top news cards for Viva connections to be able to actually pull that information in if it's set up on Boost. So that's a nice little feature, again, integrating something from a SharePoint side of things into the Viva connection side. All right, forms. So, and I ran into this because I use forms for a lot of different things. I've worked with a lot of customers around forms. And one of the confusion points is that I may want to send this out to people to fill out versus I want to be able to collaborate with somebody. And if you guys have done that before, you notice that they're like very similar, like in the same window, and it just doesn't work so well. So late February to late March, they're making this change where they're separating the two. Well, you'll be able to hit the send button that will get you to be able to send it out to somebody to fill out the form. If you click on the ... or the more from settings, you'll be able to then see, hey, I want to do it with a collaborator. So then it will give me that window to be able to set that up so somebody else can collaborate with it. Just makes it easier from an end user who has to create these things and collaborate with other people versus somebody who has to fill this out, right? And that information. So it just makes it a lot easier to be able to do things. So make sure you guys notify your end users of this change, again, coming up here between late February, which is already happening, to here, late March, coming up pretty soon. All right, another forms, but now from a bookings. And if you remember, I would remember a couple months ago, we actually talked about bookings and what it can do. One of the nice things about this change happening here in mid-March to late March is the fact that if you want to have, say, a new appointment happens and you want the person doing the appointment to fill out some prerequisite information. I always think about like that doctor stuff that you have to do ahead of time, right? That type of an idea. Or maybe it's just, what are you looking for, right? And maybe it's a contractor and you want to be able to get some information specifically. You want to be able to have a Microsoft form that they can fill out ahead of time. And so in this particular scenario, admins and schedulers are able to go in and set up these forms and then provide the links inside bookings. And what that will do is that when I go ahead and say I want a new booking, it will automatically then, after I book it, it'll show me that in my screen that, hey, please fill these out. Oh, and by the way, you'll get an email that also has the links to those forms to be filled out. And so from a back-end perspective, you can then track when these forms are filled out specifically for a booking, and be able to resend that out if you need to. Make sure you get that information prior to that meeting that you're going to have. So nice little addition to the bookings, Microsoft Bookings app. And again, mid-March here to late March. All right. Let's go back. Let's go to SharePoint for 2 seconds. We got a couple things on SharePoint, OneDrive. This one has to do with SharePoint App Requests. In the past, when a request would come out, it would go to the tenant admin or whoever had access to that app side of things from a SharePoint admin side of things. But a lot of the site owners didn't even know that their end users were requesting particular apps. And so what this does is gives that site owner the ability to be able to understand that these apps are being requested. And it kind of puts them in the middle of it so they can say, hey, yeah, no, I don't think we really want to go down that route type of scenario, as opposed to, yeah, here it is, good. And then maybe the tenant admin comes to the site owner and goes, did you know this is being requested type scenario. So this is coming out here, targeted release for those people who are on the targeted release schedule, early March to mid-March. So at this point, maybe out already. And then standard from early April to mid-April. So you'll be able to find these requests as a site owner. If you go into site settings, add an app, and then you'll be in this screen here, which is the SharePoint apps. In that screen, you'll have a My Requests area, so you can see what is being requested for your particular SharePoint site. Just make sure you notify your site owners that this is happening. And again, it's happening here fairly shortly. Still in that genre of SharePoint and now OneDrive. If you guys are familiar with the OneDrive Sync Center, the Sync Center notification area is getting a refresh. Some things are moving around a little bit. It's going to be more of that fluid design you've probably seen happening with a lot of the Office apps. Things like settings is going to go to a gear in the upper right-hand corner. You'll have the recycle bin sitting out there. A lot easier for you to access now, so you can click on that and get into the recycle bin to see what's going on. And the account name, right? So in this case, it's OneDrive-Katoso. That'll be open no matter what, right? If there any errors or anything, you'll see that, so that from a support side of things, they will always know what site you're in, so you can, take a screenshot, send that. You don't have to ask the question if you have multiple tenants they have to deal with. Great. Let's move the teams. There's a couple ones on teams here that I want to kind of talk through, and then we'll jump into some other just mentions and then some admin related ones you really need to consider. This is a new one when it comes to teams, casting with teams. So say, for instance, you're in a meeting and your device, maybe you're in a conference room and you have a device, but the device is not logged into the meeting, right? The conference room may be logged into the meeting, but you want to share something from your device. So there is going to be an additional feature. When you click on the ... and go into settings, you will see this option of doing cast. And what this does is do kind of a wirelessly connecting to the Teams room, the Microsoft Teams room, because it'll actually bring up, hey, I see locally there's these conference rooms here, Teams rooms, that are available for you to cast to, right? So what is it utilizing to do that? So a couple things. Bluetooth beaconing needs to be enabled on these Microsoft Teams rooms, right? So once that's enabled, then it can be picked up by, in this case, the Windows desktop, or it could be the Mac OS. But it is that Teams client that's doing that. On the device, you need to have Bluetooth enabled to be able to actually pick up that Bluetooth beaconing piece. Once that's done, I literally can then cast from my computer to that Microsoft Teams room, right? So making it easier for me able to do things that way, as opposed to having to jump in the meeting and then share desktop. Okay. So that's coming mid-March to late April. Another feature that's coming down the pipeline, and I know some of you organizations are doing things like Power Automate within Teams or Power Automate all the way. So this is a feature called Workflows in Teams App Store for messaging. So this is happening mid-March here to the end of March. So pretty soon you'll start seeing this as an option, right? So if you were to go into, say, a chat, and you go down and look at the store, even if you go to add an app into your normal way of doing it from Teams, and you look out for workflow, right? I happen to have a tenant. I did this. It's sitting there, right? It's there. What is it? Well, it allows me, especially from a chat or a messaging side of things, to be able to add things very easily. We're able to do this with Power Automate, but this is specific to doing chat, right? Group chat, Teams chat, channel chat, those types of things. And so what it does is allows me to be able to create repeatable actionable items. So for instance, if I want to be able to have an option to be able to create a planner task from something that's in a chat message or in a channel message, I can do that. If I want to be able to do, maybe it's a to-do item, I've done that with Power Automate, but this makes it a lot easier for me to be able to get that up and running and created. Prerequisites for this, you do have to have Power Automate running, right? Enabled within the within your tenant. This is an app that can be blocked at the Teams Admin Center in your app management section. And then when you create these, you can set it up to be manual. So if I have something specifically and I have a chat and I want to be able to do a to-do from that chat, I can do it that way, or it can be automatic. Just make sure you update your training information for people so that they know that this is happening and this change is coming soon. Let's come to the admin center within Teams. And within Teams, this is happening at this point. So if I have any, as an admin, I want to be able to maybe export some of the content or the content from any of the lists. In the list, I mean like the teams, right? And see all the teams or members or channels or even users. And I want to export that because I want to do some, do some analysis off the bat from that. We will have this ability to be able to download as a CSV file, right? Understand that we'll take any updates or any changes that happened within the last 24 hours, that will come into the CSV, right? And you can download that. This is happening here now, and you should be seeing that in your Teams Admin Center fairly shortly. So let your admins know this and just update your operational documentation as needed. Big one, and I know that we have Richard going to be talking about this here shortly. I believe next month we're going to actually have this. So late March and early April, we're going to be talking about connected shared channels. Right? It's going in a public preview during this time. And basically what this is allows you to be able to externally bring in partners or other collaborators, right? But they're not inside your tenant. And what that does is it makes it so much easier for them to be able to connect with you. They don't have to switch tenants to be able to interact with you from a channel side of things. So it's kind of like if I had a group chat with somebody outside of the organization, it shows up on my chat list. If I have a shared channel and I'm outside of that organization, I will be able to see that within my Teams list, right? And not as a switch, right? And I see a lot of people some people are happy about that. That is a big deal, right? And I know from a Microsoft perspective, that's my daily, that it's just going to make it a lot easier for us to collaborate with our customers. Some things to keep in mind: Azure AD B2B is the back end of this. That's what's going to help us to be able to make that connection and bring those people in. That does need to be set up. But just so you know, it is a dedicated SharePoint site collection, similar to private channels. So that's what it's going to do behind the scenes. But understand, as opposed to private channels, which a lot of things, functionality is not quite there yet. There's a lot of things like, for instance, Meet Now and schedule meetings are already going to work. Support tabs and connectors and that kind of stuff. Some of that stuff is coming soon. But being able to do regular tabs, right? You can do some of that stuff. Message extensions coming soon. And it does support the Microsoft 365 information protection features so that I can make sure content stays within that team and it doesn't go outside of your organization if you choose to do so. And you'll notice specifically that the icon, let me actually do this. You notice the icon is a little bit different than your private channels, right? So keep in mind, it's a nice little thing. That's a good question. Planner, ooh, I'm going to say it's probably, but that's a good question. Because it's B2B, it's very possible that it may work, right? So let us do a little more research on that, but I'm almost positive just because we're using that Azure B2B piece, it's more than likely going to be something that we can access. It's all about permissions, right? And right now with the guest access, things like Planner doesn't necessarily work. So great question. Some quick mentions, some things. And again, this deck will be available after the fact if you want to look at this, but some things to highlight. If you're an organization that likes a lot of consistency across the board, then you're going to like the capability of being able to have organizational fonts within PowerPoint. So you have this, we'll have this ability here to be able to upload this organizational asset, right? Asset to be able to be used within PowerPoint. So you can have this subset of fonts that are the ones that are the organizational deemed the ones that we want to use for a lot of our content. That's a big one. There is going to be a change, and I'm going to highlight this one here, the Power Platform Admin Center homepage. So that's going to change a little bit because what you're going to end up getting is it's going to more look like the Teams Admin Center homepage or the Microsoft 365 homepage. Yeah, Brian, sure, wingdings are going to be the default. Good luck on that one. But that homepage is going to morph a little bit because I know when we normally go into there, it's like, which environment do you want to be in? And all this really tactical stuff, now it's going to be more high level so you can really see what's going on. So things like Message Center, specifically for Power Platform, Service Health and Documentation and Training sections, you'll be able to modify those and use those. Another one, if you're utilizing ServiceNow as a, ITIL tracking, incident problem, those types of things, guess what? You're going to be able to really have a nice integration with Microsoft 365. There's this feature that it's available now where I can install in ServiceNow, right, the Microsoft 365 support integration app. And what that will do is it unlocks support features so that if I have anything happening over here on 365, it'll then automatically bring it over into the ServiceNow side of things based off of my criteria, right? So there's a nice link that kind of gives you that information specifically on what's going on there. And then I did want to call out the roaming bandwidth control, which is this last one here. This one is happening mid-March to end of March, and this one allows your admins, especially for teams, to be able to say in this geolocation, we want to be able to set a dynamic bandwidth policy, right? Because they may not have good internet connectivity from that particular location, so you can then limit it based off of that need. All right, then let me do some updates, quick updates. So these are all things that have changed from a timeline perspective. Big ones would be like the content types from Modern Library. That one was late February, now moved to mid-March. That one basically is the idea of being able to, in a modern library, be able to modify the content type in that modern library. There is a change happening here with the chat filter, which this is pretty cool, the ability in chat to be able to filter out anything that's a non-meeting, right? So I just want to see chat, and I don't want to see any meeting chat or chat bots, right? I just want to filter to just chats, group chats, individual chats, whatever that happens to be. And then this is another one for the admin center specifically. This is rolling out a little bit later than what they originally thought, but in the admin center, to be able to actually see at a user level which teams they have permissions for, right? So I can see if, Michelle and, we're having an issue with Michelle and we need to be able to, limit what she has access to. I can literally go into that in the user details and see which teams she has access to. Sorry, Michelle, I just had to use you as an example. And then
no, I don't mind. You mean you'll take some of my workload? I'll take it.
Oh yeah, totally. Right.
Lock me out.
And these are things here that you guys really need to make sure from an admin perspective you're dealing with, right? So the one that's been on here forever is the IE11 desktop app retires June 15th. If you haven't figured that one out yet, get your butt moving, right? Those types of things. Additional ones, the retirement of the get set /set fish filter policy is being changed. You can do a lot of this stuff now using the spoof intelligence insight that's here. That's part of the Microsoft spoof activity capabilities. There's some changes from the REST API, so make sure you take a look at that. And that's happening here March 2023. So you have a little bit of time. They're just giving a nice ample warning. And the same thing with the retirement of the superseded Azure AD Connect sync. Basically what that means is at that point, whatever that version of AD sync, Connect sync, I should say, is out there, all previous versions are going to not work, right? So they're basically telling you by mid-March, make sure you're up on the latest and greatest of that particular sync. And that's if you're utilizing Azure AD Connect sync to bring your domain, right? Your on-prem domain up into Azure, and then all those profiles are there. All right, and I think that's everything.